There is a lake here, and almost nobody outside this county knows its name. It sits in a bowl of rolling green hills, 11 miles southwest of downtown Minneapolis, with a freeway humming somewhere beyond the trees. It looks ordinary. It is not. The hollow this water fills was scooped out by a block of ice that took centuries to die, and the ground we are walking on was farmland within living memory. Stay with us. This quiet park has a very long story. This is Bryant Lake Regional Park in Eden Prairie, Hennepin County, Minnesota, on the northern edge of the Minnesota River Valley. The park covers about 170 acres of rolling hills, woodland, wetland, and grassland, wrapped around a lake of roughly 180 acres. It is managed by the Three Rivers Park District. To the south, a few miles away, the land drops off into one of the strangest river valleys on this continent. We will get there. Notice the ground. It does not roll in long, smooth waves the way farmland usually does. It heaves. Short, steep rises, sudden hollows, small pockets of marsh in low places that never quite drain. This is not the shape water and time would carve on their own. This is the shape ice leaves when it dies badly, breaking apart and stranding pieces of itself under its own rubble. Every dip and knob on this trail is a fingerprint of something enormous that is no longer here. The last great glaciation peaked more than 20,000 years ago. Ice came into Minnesota in lobes, tongues of a continental sheet steered by the shape of the bedrock beneath. The one that mattered most here was the Des Moines lobe, pushing down from the northwest, and a branch of it that geologists call the Grantsburg sublobe, which spread across what is now the Twin Cities. It carried ground-up rock and clay and sand. It was hundreds of meters thick. It reshaped everything it touched. When ice like that retreats, it does not withdraw in a tidy line. It stagnates. Great dead slabs sit still and slowly rot, buried under the debris melting out of their own bodies. The landscape left behind is chaotic, lumpy, undecided, exactly the ground we are crossing right now. By roughly 11,000 years ago, most of Minnesota was ice-free. What remained was a raw new country of gravel and stranded boulders, waiting for something to grow. Here is how you make a lake like this one. A block of ice breaks off the retreating glacier and gets buried in sand and gravel washed out from the melting front. Insulated, it survives long after the rest of the ice is gone. Then slowly it melts and the ground above it collapses into the space it leaves. The pit fills with groundwater and rain. Geologists call it a kettle. Thousands of Minnesota lakes are kettles. This is one of them. The lake in front of us is small by Minnesota standards and steeper than it looks. Its shoreline runs a little over 3 miles. The deepest hole in it drops to about 45 feet, which is a lot of water for something you can walk around in an afternoon. Only around 64 acres of it are shallow enough for sunlight to reach the bottom and grow plants. The rest is dark, cold, and quiet all year round. In summer, the shallows here go thick with vegetation. The state fisheries notes are blunt about it, warning anglers that from June through September the lake is usually too weedy to fish from shore. That weediness is not a flaw. It is a shallow lake being a shallow lake. Plants hold the sediment down, they keep the water clear, and they shelter the young fish. What looks like a mess from the bank is the engine room of the whole system. Now look south in your mind. Between roughly 13,000 and 11,000 years ago, an enormous glacial lake called Agassiz sat on the retreating ice margin, and it found an outlet through Minnesota. The river that carried it away is called Glacial River Warren. It ran for something like 3,000 years. It cut a valley up to 5 miles wide and 250 feet deep. Then Agassiz found another way out, and River Warren simply stopped. What that leaves is one of the great oddities of North American geography. The modern Minnesota River, a mild and modest stream, wanders along the floor of a canyon far too large for it. Geologists call a river like that underfoot. It is a small tenant in a mansion built by a giant. And the giant is gone. Everything about the country south of this park, the slopes, the bluffs, the terraces, was cut by water that has not flowed for around 10,000 years. The walls of that vanished flood are the bluffs of the Minnesota River Valley, and they run right along the southern edge of Eden Prairie. River Warren was joined by a comparatively small Mississippi near what is now Fort Snelling, and it carved onward past present-day St. Paul, where a waterfall bigger than anything in the modern Midwest once thundered. Those bluffs are the reason this suburb has a wild southern edge at all. Steep ground was the last ground anyone wanted to plow. That is worth sitting with because it explains this park too. Look at the pitch of these hillsides. Land like this is expensive to farm and awkward to build on. Across the whole of this county, the places that stayed green are almost always the places that were hardest to flatten. Steepness is a kind of protection. The lake shore we are following survived not because anyone loved it first, but because for a long time nobody could easily use it. Before any of this was farmland, much of it was forest. French speakers called it the Grand Bois, the Big Woods, and English speakers translated it directly. It was a band of dense hardwood running diagonally across south-central Minnesota, thousands of square miles of sugar maple, basswood, American elm, and red oak, so shaded and closed in that early travelers described moving through a green twilight. Almost all of it was cleared for farms. What survives now survives mostly in parks. So this stretch of woods is not decoration. It is a fragment, a remnant, a piece of something that used to run for 100 miles. Maple and basswood hold this ground. The elms that once stood among them are mostly gone, taken across the 20th century by Dutch elm disease, which swept through Minnesota's hardwoods and its city streets alike. The forest around us is a survivor of two catastrophes, the axe and the fungus, and it is still standing. On the drier ground and along the river, the woods thinned into something else entirely. Oak savanna. Scattered bur oaks with thick, fire-resistant bark, standing wide apart over open grass, a landscape that only exists where fire runs often enough to kill the saplings and spare the veterans. In Hennepin and Dakota counties, surveyors recorded these oak openings north and south of the Minnesota River. Savanna is not woodland becoming prairie. It is its own thing, and fire is what makes it. Which raises an uncomfortable question about the trees we are passing. Without fire, savanna does not stay savanna. It fills in. It becomes thicket, then closed woods, and the old open-grown oaks are shaded out by their own descendants. Much of the restoration work in parks across this region is an attempt to put fire back into a landscape that has spent a century learning to live without it. A prairie that is not burned is a prairie that is quietly disappearing. And through all of that deep time, people, this is Dakota homeland. The eastern Dakota, including the Mdewakanton and the Wapikute, lived along these rivers and lakes and were here long before any of the names on the modern map. At Bedote, the confluence of the Minnesota and the Mississippi, a short way east of here, is the place that Dakota tradition holds as the origin of the Dakota people. It is the spiritual center of the world. It matters how that sentence is spoken. Not was, is. The Dakota are here now, in Minnesota and beyond it, in living communities with governments and languages and futures. This lake, these hills, this shoreline, sit inside a homeland that never stopped being a homeland. Walking here is not walking through an empty past. It is walking through somebody's present, on ground whose oldest and truest names are not the ones printed on the trail map we are following. Then comes the year that changes everything. In 1851, two treaties were signed. The Treaty of Mendota on the 5th of August was made near Pilot Knob on the south bank of the Minnesota River, within sight of Fort Snelling, with the Mdewakanton and Wapikute bands. Together with the treaty at Traverse des Sioux, it transferred more than 30 million acres, nearly all of southern and western Minnesota, and confined the Dakota to a narrow reservation along the upper Minnesota River. The promised money was late, or short, or never came. The consequences of that were catastrophic and are not this park's story to tell, but they are the reason the map looks the way it does. What matters here is the mechanism. The Treaty of 1851 opened the land west of the Mississippi to settlement, and within a single year, wagons were on this prairie. Everything modern about this place, including the trail we are on, begins with that signature. Before a settler could own anything, a surveyor had to make it ownable. Crews came through with chain and compass, cutting the country into a grid of townships and sections, 6 miles by 6 miles, then 1 mile squares, then quarters. It is an act of imagination as much as measurement. A landscape of woods and marsh and lake is rewritten as a ledger of rectangles. Those surveyors also wrote down what they saw, and their notes are how we know what grew here. And you can still read it. The straight roads that box this park in, the abrupt right angles of the suburb beyond the trees, the way a field of prairie ends in a perfect line. That is the survey, still governing the shape of a place 170 years later. The ice made the hills. The surveyors made the corners. Almost every boundary we cross today was drawn by someone with a chain, walking a line through the woods. Settlement here began in 1852, the year after the treaty. The names recorded from that first wave include John Mackenzie, David Livingston, Alexander Good, Hiram Abbott, and Samuel Mitchell. They came for the prairie soil in the southern part of the township and the timber in the north. They cut, they burned, they broke sod, they built. Within 6 years, there was a town board, and it held its first meeting on the 11th of May, 1858. That date is not an accident. The 11th of May, 1858, is the day Minnesota became a state. The township already had a name by then, and it came from a visitor. Elizabeth Fries Ellet was an East Coast writer who traveled through here and published her impressions in a book called Summer Rambles in the West. She called this country the Garden Spot of the territory. The name she gave it in 1853 was Eden. The full name came from the land itself. Eden for the garden, Prairie for the open grassland that ran across the southern part of the township above the river Bluffs. That prairie is almost entirely gone now, plowed into cropland and then paved into suburb. A few remnants survive in conservation areas nearby, a handful of acres each, holding the plants that once covered the whole horizon. Grassland is the easiest landscape to destroy and the hardest to rebuild. And for 100 years, that is all Eden Prairie was. A farm township, quiet and slow. The census numbers tell the story better than any description. 304 people in 1860, 744 in 1880, 827 in 1900, 983 in 1920, 1,221 in 1940. In 80 years, this place added about 900 people. It was going nowhere comfortably. One of those farmers is worth naming. J.R. Cummins, born in Ireland, built a house here around 1879 and 1880 at the center of a 300-acre farm. It is the oldest house in Eden Prairie, and it still stands on the National Register of Historic Places since 1982. Cummins was a serious horticulturist. He spent years testing strains of apples and grapes, hunting for varieties tough enough to survive a Minnesota winter. Patient, unglamorous, foundational work. The lake got its name in this era too. Local histories trace it to William Bryant, one of the settlers who arrived in the first years after the treaty, and for a long time it was known as Bryant's Long Lake. That is how naming worked in the 19th century here. A body of water that had been known and used for uncounted generations was relabeled within a decade after a man who had just walked up to it. The change, when it came fast, and it started in the air. In 1946, an airfield opened on the flat ground above the Minnesota River Bluffs, and it was called Flying Cloud. It was the first real crack in the farm economy, the first big non-agricultural thing on the map. A township of 1,000 people suddenly had an airport. Nobody in 1946 could have guessed what that was the beginning of, but it was a beginning. Because everything after that is a hinge swinging. Post-war America was building suburbs at a speed that had no precedent, and the farmland closest to a growing city is always the first thing eaten. Prairie sat 11 miles from downtown Minneapolis, with good roads coming and cheap land waiting. It had spent a century as a quiet agricultural township. It had about 20 years left as one, and it did not know it. Watch the numbers now. 3,233 people in 1960. It became a village in 1962. Then Interstate 494 arrived in the mid-70s, along with a shopping center, and the township became a statutory city in 1974. By 1980, the population was 16,263. By the year 2000, it was 54,901. By 2020, 64,000. 40 years, 20 times the people. Which is why this park exists, and it exists because somebody did the arithmetic early. A county park system had been proposed as far back as 1901. The Minnesota legislature finally cleared the way in 1955, and in 1957, the Hennepin County Park Reserve District began operating. In its first 2 decades, it bought nearly 21,000 acres, most of it farmland, most of it in exactly the suburbs that were about to explode. It was renamed Three Rivers Park District in 2001. Think about what that decision actually required. To stand in a quiet farm county in the late 1950s, look at fields and pasture and a lake with a settler's name, and understand that in 30 years this would all be worth too much to save. And then to buy it anyway before the boom, with money nobody had yet made a case for. Every green acre we are walking through is the residue of that unfashionable foresight. The park has been fixing what the boom broke. Bryant Lake sits in the 9 Mile Creek watershed, and it was once listed as impaired, choked by phosphorus running off lawns and streets. The watershed district treated the lake with alum in 2008 and again in 2013, and restored wetland upstream. Phosphorus levels have been better than the state standard since 2010, and the lake was removed from the impaired list. Nearby, a stream restoration stabilized over 3,000 feet of channel. The water we are looking at holds bluegill, crappie, yellow perch, northern pike, bullhead, common carp, and tiger muskie, which are stocked. It also holds things that should not be here. Eurasian watermilfoil and curly-leaf pondweed, both introduced. Zebra mussels, first found in this lake in 2015. That is the honest condition of an urban lake in the 21st century. Cleaner than it was, healthier than it was, and permanently changed in ways nobody can undo. So what is Bryant Lake now? About 170 acres with roughly 4.5 miles of hiking trail, a swimming beach on a lake nobody could swim in safely a generation ago, a disc golf course, a boat launch, and a rowing club that trains here. Deer move through these woods at dusk. It is a small park, entirely surrounded, and it is doing an enormous amount of quiet work. And here is the thing worth carrying out of these hills. Nothing about this place was inevitable. The ice could have left a different hollow. The treaty could have gone another way, though it did not. The farms could have become parking lots and almost did. This lake is here, green and open and free to walk, because at several separate moments somebody made a decision that did not have to go this way, and it went this way. That is the real subject of a place like this. Not the spectacle, because there is none. Just deep time and human decision layered over each other in a suburb most people drive straight past. A dead block of ice, a vanished river, a stolen homeland, a farm township, a shopping center, and one stubborn county board that bought the fields before anyone else wanted them. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.